Okay, so we are starting chapter 3. Chapter 3 consists of the Silk Roads, the Sea Roads, the Sand Roads, part of the Islamic world, the Americas. So we're going to go ahead and get started with part 1, which is the Silk Road. So, what are the Silk Roads? So, the Silk Roads are basically um, several roads that run from China all the way into Europe. So they're going to connect these people from Asia to Europe. They're going to spread ideas, technology, goods. We know they're going to spread religion. A lot of Buddhism is going to be spread via the Silk Roads. They're going to use camel caravans, and they're going to travel most of this span. They're going to stop at what are called caravansaries. That's kind of an important thing to know. Now, when you look at this map here, one, there are going to be some geographic and environmental obstacles that the Silk Road traders are going to have to contend with. And when you look at this, you see the Himalayan mountains. We see lots of rivers, um, obviously climate changes, different belief systems, different empires. So there's a lot to deal with. So what you end up seeing is what is called relay trade. So you see people kind of like a relay race where they pass the baton and someone else takes the other leg of it. Um, Somebody's going to go from Antioch and they might go to here, and then someone else takes it and they go over to here. So one person's not running this whole race here. Not one person's running the whole Silk Road. But what they do is they stop in these little towns called caravansaries, and they really have a little bit of everything, but you're going to see a lot of culture and ideas spread. They usually stay there maybe a month or so, and then they'll move along. Mostly luxury products are going to be brought on the Silk Road. Silk is going to be probably one of the biggest ones and most important ones because it was actually used as a form of currency. Think about currency. We know as our dollar. Um, but if all modern currencies were to disappear, what could you think of that could facilitate buying and selling of goods? During the pandemic, I would have said toilet paper because that was a hot commodity. Um, but there are certain things that are valuable. So, you might think of what types of man made objects could be extremely valuable to serve, even though they have no significant practical use. Think about, I had a student say to me, what about expensive clothing? And I thought, well, that's a good example because the value really isn't any different. If I buy leggings at Walgreens or CVS, they really serve the same purpose as Lululemon leggings, but we have placed a higher value on Lululemon leggings. So even though they actually serve the same purpose, the value is different. So that is a big difference. And so that's what we're also going to see here. The Black Death is going to spread through the Silk Roads. That is going to impact trade heavily. One interesting thing is the Mongols are going to protect the Silk Road. Now, you don't think of that as being something that you would normally think of. You think of the Mongols and you're like, oh, just the violent people. But these Mongols are actually going to protect it. They said that you could walk with a gold plate on your head and never be robbed. And that is what the Mongols did. They protected it. And they didn't protect it for the wealth. They didn't protect it for the goods. They protected it for the ideas and the fact that they could learn as much as they could from people. The Mongols were continually trying to learn. They wanted to know as much as possible. So when they would go into an area and take it over, they would try to get the most important things from the most important people. They would take the people that knew the most and take as much knowledge from them as they could. So they really had a significant impact on the Silk Road, spreading ideas and knowledge. Um, like I said, religion was one of the biggest things that spread. So when we look at this picture here, we think about Buddhism, and when we think about the original Buddhism, we think about simplistic, the one single wrap robe. Um, Remember when we see people here that have the circle around their head, there's somebody that's holy. And so when I look at this picture, I've got somebody in the center. And remember, there shouldn't be somebody being worshipped with Buddhism, but we've kind of got that going on. But notice their clothing. Their clothing is brightly colored, extravagant. We see wealth. And during this time period along the Silk Road, as Buddhism changes, it is like okay to be wealthy, which kind of seems to go against the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. The Four Noble Truths is, you know, in life there's suffering. To end suffering, follow the Eightfold Path. And part of the Eightfold Path is to give up your worldly possessions so you don't have suffering when you lose something. But we are not seeing that with the new Buddhism. And Mahayana Buddhism is going to be one of the most popular ones that are practiced along the Silk Road.
Globalization is a term that's been thrown around a lot lately, especially in light of President Donald Trump's opposition to trade deals and the UK's decision to leave the European Union. In the simplest terms, a globalized economy is the circulation of goods across many different countries. At your local grocery store, you can likely purchase tea from India, mangoes from Brazil, figs from Turkey, or coffee from Ethiopia, all in the same place. Manufactured goods like a t-shirt have likely already charted multiple oceans before making it to retail shelves, and that's all thanks to globalization. And it's a great system for the consumer. It means low prices, greater variety, and an all-around higher standard of living. To understand how globalization works, many economists still point to one of humanity's first endeavors in international trade, the Silk Road. The Silk Road wasn't the beginning of trade, but it did expand it exponentially. In the centuries leading up to the formation of the Silk Road, civilizations remained largely isolated due to geographical boundaries and fear of the unknown. However, around the 2nd century BC, China and Central Asia began to share goods and ideas through nomadic tribes. This eventually expanded into a complex network of land and sea trade routes, stretching from the Mediterranean to India and even to Southeast Asia. A slew of different goods were transported along the Silk Road, but the most common was, unsurprisingly, silk. This material had a huge effect on every society that came in contact with it. China had a complete monopoly on silk, as they were the only people who knew how to make it. So when the material was introduced to the Roman elite, who loved it for its lightness, demand skyrocketed. As the market grew, more and more working-class Chinese people moved into silk production. Like modern globalization, the Silk Road also ushered in a merging of languages, religions, and cultures. Along with goods like spices and textiles, merchants from India brought Buddhism to China and Japan, where it remains a dominant religion today. Nomads from Arabia brought Islam to South Asia, paving the way for the religion's influence in Malaysia, Indonesia, and other modern states. In fact, many historians argue that the greatest impact of the Silk Road was not the spread of products, but the spread of ideas. The Silk Road was hugely beneficial for early civilizations. It meant greater overall wealth, rapid advancements in art and technology, and increasing diplomacy among early world powers. However, today, some argue that globalization has gone too far. An interconnected economy often means a loss of cultural distinctiveness, along with traditions and even languages. A great example of this is currency. For ease of trade and commerce, much of Europe has abandoned their national denominations in favor of the euro. Many countries have done the same to adopt the US dollar. And globalization has even led to the deaths of thousands of languages, leading some experts to predict that by the year 2100, only half of modern dialects will still exist. The Silk Road left an immutable impact, affecting civilizations that weren't even directly connected to it. Merchants who charted the route stopped for goods in villages which eventually became huge cities, like Venice, Istanbul, and Aleppo. Faiths like Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism saw a much greater reach, eventually becoming three of the world's largest religions. Whether or not you agree that globalization is good, its influence in the daily lives of every human cannot be understated. Today, China is looking to connect Asia and Europe through a new Silk Road. To find out more about this initiative, check out this video right here. Thanks.
Okay, so you can see the impact of globalization. Um, it was a lot of ideas and technology that were spread more than goods. So some of the ideas, like I said, Buddhism spread like wildfire along the Silk Trade route. It's going to spread from India, where it began, to China. And again, since the Mongols are protecting the merchants, that helps facilitate the ideas that spread so quickly. Buddhism, like that image, is going to go from giving up uh, wealth to becoming wealthy. They also incorporate some Zoroastrianism, the religion started by Zoroaster. Our biggest takeaway from this is that Buddhism changed as it spread. Um, Mahayana Buddhism, remember that's the spiritual one, if you remember my dance. Mahayana Buddhism is going to be the one that's going to be most popular. And I think this quote here really says a lot. It says temples frequently included statues of Confucius, Lao Tzu, and the Buddha, with little sense of any incompatibility among them. Every black-haired son of Han, the Chinese man, the Chinese have long said, wears a Confucius thinking cap, a Taoist robe, and Buddhist sandals. Kind of letting you know that they have syncretically embedded all three of those ideas in the religion and brought them together into their personal culture. Some of the technology that is also spread are like yokes and saddles and stirrups that are going to make the use of camels, horses, and oxen a lot more effective for transportation. You're going to see the Arabs using a frame and mattress saddle, which is like a big mattress on top of a camel, and it is actually gives them the ability to transfer goods a lot more efficiently. Um, in Tang, China, they're going to invent paper money known as flying cash. Now, this makes sense because isn't it much easier to just carry paper instead of like coins or gold or goods if possible? And so, because of this, uh, you're going to see a lot of people trading a lot of goods because of the cash, because it's easier to carry. This is also going to be where Europe introduces bills of exchange or promissory notes with money, with flying cash, and with loans. You're going to see the introduction of banking houses. That is going to be a necessity because of all of this. So, with the Silk Road, we see technology, ideas spread like wildfire through the Silk Road. And what is going to lay behind the emergence of the Silk Road and what's going to keep it going? Well, the need for goods and products like silk or like horses, these are going to be the things that are going to cause people to start it. And the desire to have these goods is going to be what keeps it going for so many centuries. So, demand for products of the forest and the grasslands of Europe or Eurasia, like horses, which were controlled by the pastoral peoples, and the agricultural products and manufactured goods from the Mediterranean, Middle East, India, and China. Those are all going to be reasons that it starts. The Silk Roads are going to remain important to later empires, such as the Byzantines, the Abbasids, and the Mongols. They're all going to benefit from trade. And so there's going to be this continuing demand for hard to find luxury goods, such as silk. So the elites that are in Europe that want them, so that's going to cause a lot of that demand, and it's going to continue to facilitate trade.